In today's lesson, we're going to be talking about hedging. But before we start talking about hedging, you need to know exactly what a hedge is. When we're talking about hedging in any sort of financial market or sports betting, it's just when you're taking a bet against what your original position was or your original bet was in order to lock in a profit or to lower your risk. So any sports bet you make is always going to be negative EV. If any bet you make without any other knowledge is negative EV, then anytime you are in a situation where you're going to be wanting to hedge, you're going to be taking on a negative EV bet. And usually you're going to be in these hedge situations when the market is gone in your favor, meaning you've got a team to win the Super Bowl. Now they're all the way into, let's say you've got the Kansas City Chiefs to win the Super Bowl. Here they are now in the AFC Championship game. Surely their odds are now far lower. They're a shorter price, a bigger favorite than they were in, let's say, August when you put this bet in. So currently the Chiefs are, you can get them at like plus 500 depending on the sports book. Well, if they get to the championship game and now they're favored by 7 points in the championship game, they may actually be minus money just to win the Super Bowl. They may be minus 125, let's say, to win the Super Bowl, and you've got them at 5-1. So a bet against them winning the Super Bowl, if you bet either them not to make it to the Super Bowl, so you bet against them in that championship game, or you bet against them in the Super Bowl if they get there, that would be considered a hedge. Here we are, we're sitting in the AFC Championship game. We've got the favorite to win. Out of the 4 teams left, we've got the favorite at plus 500 to win the Super Bowl. The question always arises, John, should I hedge this bet? And my answer is always the same. No, you should not, because once I do the calculations for you guys, and we're going to head over to the spreadsheet, we're going to do these calculations, you'll understand why. But I want to first go over the psychology. Why do you want to hedge in the first place? Generally, it's out of fear. We have a bet made and we don't want to lose. As human beings, we've evolved to actually be risk averse. We don't want to lose what we already have. When I'm talking about bankroll management, it has a psychological function. And that is when our bankroll and bankroll management is manageable, our unit sizes are manageable, we psychologically can handle it much better. We can deal with the losses and we can deal with the wins much better. We stay more even keeled. Okay, so now you have that in mind. Let's go back to when we initially made this Kansas City bet, this hypothetical Kansas City to win the Super Bowl bet. The first question I always get is, should I hedge? The second question to which I ask that person is, well, how much did you bet? And I would say easily 90% of the time, they bet far more than they were supposed to bet because they didn't follow my bankroll management strategies on unit sizing and how to make these bets. What generally happens is you just place a large bet because you wanted to place a large bet, and now you get into a situation at the end of the year where you almost force yourself to have to hedge because you don't want to take that loss when you're so close. You just want to lock in a win. The other point here is often, again, it's Kansas City to win the Super Bowl. As they get close or as they win and get into the Super Bowl, I always get, should I just play the other team? Understand, I want you to know the moment you place any bet, what your out is. Where am I going with this bet? For me, when I place futures bets, it is almost 100% sure that I will be seeing that bet out no matter what. Because this is a numbers game. If I'm getting in at plus EV, even if I didn't get in at plus EV and I get to the point where this is now a plus EV bet, if you get your team to the AFC Championship game or the Super Bowl at whatever price you got them before the season, that you are now in a plus situation. Matter of fact, the sports books, what they do now is offer you an out. They'll offer you on a big parlay, let's say, they'll offer you the ability to get out of that parlay. Now, what you have to do is what we're going to do here with the expected value calculations coming up. You need to do your own EV to figure out if this is a good play. But especially when these are particularly large types of parlays, a $20 parlay that's going to pay $10,000, and here you are with one more leg of that parlay needing to hit for you to make $10,000. If this was a one-off thing and you have one more leg of a parlay and you win an inordinate amount of money, fine. If this is a one-off type of thing, go ahead, cash out of it, have fun, you made some money. If you're doing this consistently, you're just costing yourself more money by hedging. Let's dive into the numbers. Let's look at the spreadsheets. All right, guys, I got this little spreadsheet that I put together, and I think it's going to help clarify what I was talking about in the beginning of this video and hopefully show you why I don't particularly like hedging, but also why I said if these are one-off type of situations, you may want to just go ahead and hedge because you have not been doing this. You're not doing this on a consistent basis, and you just want to go ahead and not take a loss. Also, what you're going to notice is if you are risking the proper amount, that anxiety and that need to want to suddenly get out of that bet is not going to be there. So let's dive into it. I just started out with that hypothetical Kansas City to win the Super Bowl. Their current odds are plus 500 at most books. And you're going to be risking 0.2 units to win 1 unit if we are doing this, of course, with proper money management, bankroll management, and unit sizes. The hypothetical line, they're playing the Dallas Cowboys in this Super Bowl and in that dream world. The hypothetical line is going to be Kansas City as a 3.5-point favorite, minus 110 on the juice. Dallas is a 3.5-point dog, of course, minus 110 on the juice. And then the money line is going to be Kansas City minus 200, Dallas plus 160, which is approximately where a money line would be on a 3.5-point spread. We need to know, firstly, what is the probability that Kansas City wins this game? Now, based on minus 200 and plus 160, we know that the house is taking juice. The sportsbook is taking juice on that number. So what the implied odds are more like minus 180. It's going to be somewhere in the middle between the minus 200 and the plus 160. So the fair line, at least according to the sportsbook here that we're looking at, is going to be minus 180. So that calculation is done. We get a 64.3% chance that Kansas City wins this game. That's the implied odds here, or the implied probabilities. Kansas City loses then, of course, would be 100% minus that 64.3%, or we could do the calculation for plus 180. Either way, you get 35.7%, right? So that's our baseline. We know that we're going to win this bet now almost 65%, 64 and change percent of the time. We're going to win this bet that we were 5-1 on at the beginning of the season. The EV calculation is going to be the probability that Kansas City wins this game, which we figured out, the payout that you're going to receive if they do in fact win, which would be 1 unit, then the probability Kansas City loses, which is 35.7%, multiplied by how much you will stand to lose if they do in fact lose this game, which is going to be 0.2 units. So that would be a negative 0.2 units for your calculations, as you're going to lose that amount. And when you do that calculation, you come up with 0.571 expected value. What that means is, over time, if you continue to make this bet, you will have an expected value of 0.571 units. If you're $100 per unit better, you can expect on average $57.10 on this bet. Obviously a great bet because we're now in an advantageous position. We've got our team all the way to the Super Bowl, so they've only got one more game to go, and they are favored in that game. So obviously, if we can get ourselves in that situation all the time, we would make a whole lot of money. Now you're thinking, man, it's all or nothing on one game. I really just want to hedge and guarantee myself not to lose. So let's say you do a hedge for Dallas plus 3.5. You're going to take them on the spread at minus 110. So you're going to have to risk 0.22 units to win 0.2 units. So if you win this Dallas bet plus 3.5, you'll offset the losses that you may incur with Kansas City to win this game outright. But you do have that chance that this game falls in a middle. So Kansas City might win this game and not cover the spread. They win the game by 3, you're going to win both bets. So that sounds amazing. You have a chance to middle, in which case you'll win even more. You're going to win both bets, so you'll win 1.2 units as opposed to just the 1 unit if you did nothing. And of course, if you increase the hedge amount on this, the greater you stand to win, the more you stand to win on that middle. So let's just go over the calculations. How would we figure that out? Well, first we have to figure out what's the probability of each one of these events happening. Now we know that the spread should be about 50-50, right? Probability that Kansas City wins this game and covers. The only way Kansas City covers the game is if they win. So 50% of the time, they are going to cover this 3.5-point spread. And of course, they win 100% of the time that they cover. So that would be at 50%. The probability that Kansas City wins and does not cover gets a little bit more complicated. So what's the probability that Kansas City does not cover this game? Well, if it's 50% that they cover, it's 50% that they don't cover. And it's a 3.5-point spread, so we don't have to worry about a push here. So they're either going to cover this game or they're not going to cover this game. So 50% of the time they cover, 50% they do not cover. Now, what portion of that 50% do they actually win the game and we hit the middle? How do we figure that out? Well, we know from the previous example that 35.7% of the time Kansas City loses this game outright. So we've got 50%, we've got 35.7% of the time Dallas just wins this game outright. That equals 85.7%. We just take the difference. We're just missing one piece here. The difference of 100% and the 85.7% gets us that 14.3%. That's the piece that's missing. There's only 3 possible scenarios. They equal 100%. And we should be fairly accurate here on our percentages based on the market, right? So we've got those 3 scenarios now. Now we can figure out the calculation for the first hedge. And that hedge being, we're going to take Dallas on the spread. So the calculation would be, we'd figure out the probability that Kansas City wins this game and covers, which we have figured out. And you multiply that by the payout on the original bet, which would be 1 unit, minus how much we're going to lose on our hedge, which is going to be 0.2 units or 0.22 units is what we're going to lose on the hedge bet. And we add that to the probability Kansas City wins and doesn't cover, which is our ideal situation. That's our middle. And we multiply that by the original bet that we stand to win, which is 1 unit, and add that to our hedge win, which is going to be an additional 0.2 units. So we're going to win 1.2 units. That gets multiplied by the 14.3%. Then to that, we add the probability Kansas City loses, which is 35.7%. And we multiply that by the loss on the original bet, because we're going to lose that original bet now, which is 0.2. So we get negative 0.2 units. But we win our hedge bet, and we win 0.2 units. So it winds up being 0. And when we do that calculation, we come up with an expected value of 0.561. So slightly less than what the expected value would be if we did nothing at all. But in this case, of course, we're eliminating the risk. We can't lose anything here because in the 3 scenarios, we either break even or we win on our original bet, or ideally we win 1.2. So Kansas City wins and covers. So we're going to win 1 minus the 0.22. So we'll win 0.78 units, or we're going to win 1.2 units on the middle, or we are going to lose our original bet, win our hedge, and break even and be flat. That is one hedging scenario, but as you can see, our expected value is going to decrease. Why? Because we're adding in a negative EV play to the equation. The negative EV play being, we're now taking a game that's 50-50 at a minus 110. We're paying the juice. So that juice shows up in the expected value calculation. I hope you understand that. Let's look at scenario 2 where you say, you know what, I'm just going to hedge by taking Dallas on the money line, because if they win, I'll get the plus 160, and maybe that's a better scenario. So let's do the calculations for that. It's a little bit easier than the first one. There's no middle. So we know what the probability is of Kansas City winning. We are going to multiply that by the payout on the original, which is 1, and subtract out the hedge amount, which is a 0.125 unit. That's how much we're risking here, because we're going to risk 0.125 to win 0.2. Again, we're trying to be flat. That's our goal in this particular hedge. We could hedge with different amounts. I'm going to show you that in a second. But we're risking 0.125 units to win 0.2 units. So we subtract that out from our payout, multiply that out by the 64.3% that Kansas City wins this game. And then we add that to Kansas City losing probability, which is 35.7%. We multiply that by how much we would stand to win on the hedge minus what we would have lost on the original bet, which is going to flatten each other out. It's going to be 0. So we wind up with an expected value of 0.5625, which is actually slightly better than the original hedge of Dallas plus 3.5, which you can get a middle on. And but neither are going to be better than the original bet. Now let's just take a look. If I go into the spreadsheet and let's just say I change the to win amount. So let's look at this first hedge. And you say, well, I don't want to just break flat and even. I want to guarantee myself a profit. So I'm going to play to win 0.4 units. Well, look at my expected value. My expected value actually goes down to 0.551. And that should also make sense to you. Again, the more we're going to risk on a play that is negative EV, it's going to obviously lower our expected value. And the same thing holds true on hedge number 2. If I want to jack this up to try to win 0.6 units, my expected value goes down to 0.544643 units, right? So the more I risk on this hedge, the lower my expected value becomes. So we go back to my original point at the beginning of this video. This is why I don't particularly like to hedge. I play these scenarios out, but I'm also in these situations far greater than maybe the average sports bettor who's just doing this for fun. So for me, giving away that 0.01 unit every time I'm in this situation doesn't make any sense, because over time, I'm going to accumulate that extra EV on my bets. If you're doing this consistently, you need to fight the urge to put yourself in a situation that's worse than you would be if you just let the game play out. Now, you'll also see scenarios where the sports book is going to offer you a buyout. What you have to do is a similar calculation to what I'm showing you here. Figure out what your expected value is if you just let whatever the bet is or the parlay, whatever it may be, to play out. You figure out that expected value, and then you figure out what your expected value is on whatever the payout scenario is. So let's say you've got 5 legs of a parlay already hit, and you just need one more leg of a parlay. And let's, for simplistic terms, we'll just say it's a spread bet at minus 110 on both sides. If they're offering you a payout, you need to figure out what your calculation is. What is the probability, which on a spread is going to be 50%, that you hit that bet, and take into account, you do the calculations just like this, how much you're going to get paid out, and then do an expected value of the payout, or not necessarily the payout, but do an expected value of the scenario that loses the bet for you. So let's just say you had a 5-leg parlay, and this was the last leg of your parlay was Kansas City against Dallas at 3.5 point spread, and you had Kansas City minus the 3.5 to win your parlay. The other 5 legs have come in. The sportsbook is offering you a payout. What you'd have to do now is compare what you can be expected to win if Kansas City just goes ahead and covers that game, and what the probability is that they cover the game. So let's just say you win $10,000 if Kansas City wins this bet, right? Kansas City covers 3.5, you win $10,000. You're going to take 50% of 10,000. That's going to be your calculation. 50% of the time, you're going to win $10,000. And then whatever the amount is that you risked, you're going to lose that amount 50% of the time. So if you take that calculation, you add your 5,000 on the 50% of 10,000, and let's just say you made a $100 parlay, that's going to win you $10,000. 50% of the time, you're going to lose $100, so that you're going to be minus 50. Your EV is going to be plus $4,950. Now you have to figure out what's the payout that they're giving you. If they're not giving you more than $4,950, then it's a bad payout. If they're offering you $4,500, it looks tempting. But again, some people are just going to say, well, I'd rather just have the $4,500. If you're doing this over time, you don't want the $4,500. You have to accept the fact that 50% of the time, you're just going to lose that bet. And if you're good at this, you're going to be in this scenario over and over again. And over time, you're going to make more money by just letting it play out. So that's my advice on hedging. These are the formulas that are going to help you figure out whether you should be hedging or not. Hopefully it's not too confusing for you. If it is, of course, just leave a comment or speak to me in the Discord. I'm always happy to help. And until the next video, I hope you guys make some money.